Hi, this is Kim with www.embody-light.com, and I do psychic readings, hypnotherapy, Akashic records, twin flame work, Reiki healing, sound healing, all kinds of energy healing. Basically, what I do is help you to figure out how you're creating the reality you're currently creating and how to alter that if it's not favorable. So, the subject of this video today is the incoming soul and the contractual agreement. And there's several parts to it. I have several pages of channeling on this subject alone. So, first thing I want to talk about, so I'll be looking down quite a bit at my notes. We have to understand everything that goes into the planning of a soul coming into the world, being born. And as I talked about in my last video, we had a situation until maybe the last year or so where there was actually a false light where souls could go after they passed. And a lot of souls got trapped in that light and sometimes have difficult crossing because of the memory of it. And the other thing we have to understand is that we do have past lives, and whatever happened in your past life, whatever your last thought, your last vision, your last set of circumstances were, if you did not ascend to the other side, if you stayed earthbound for some reason or in the false light, you may have been in a situation that's called an opportunistic soul, which there are two ways when a soul comes in to life. Number one is where it's, and I'm going to go into more detail on this, where it's pre-planned, where you've chosen this with the creator. This is my life. This will be my children, on and on and on. That's one way, and those are contractual agreements. But then there is another way where souls come to a mother, and it's an opportunistic situation. And that is those souls where they probably have died an unfavorable death, and whatever the circumstance was, they will attach themselves to a new circumstance. So I've recently learned through confirmation of my guides and another channeling I was watching that some of the reasons that children are born with handicaps or deficiencies of a certain sort is because in their last life they died probably a violent death that they never had any resolution. So that would be considered an opportunistic soul, where it wasn't contracted, but the situation of the mother at the time fit the situation of the incoming soul. And I'll talk a little bit about that more as we go on. The planet itself was under certain contractual agreements up till recently that have now expired. So a lot of these things that used to be are no longer true. And so with all this in mind, the next part of it is, or not next part, I don't know that it goes in any specific order, is we choose a time to be born, to come into life that's going to make the greatest impact for what we want to achieve through the astrology. Now, I'm not an astrology expert at all by any means. You would want to go check out somebody else who knows about that. But, it's got to do with your planets, your moons, all these things, and the certain situation you're going to be born into. So, as I was talking about, the opportunistic soul and the mother, it could have been a certain set of circumstances, like maybe a soul of somebody. It could have been something like, I'll just use this as an example. Maybe the soul that's coming into life, maybe in their last incarnation, they had maybe severe problems with alcohol. Maybe they died in a bar fight. Maybe they got into a car accident. But with that situation in mind, it isn't just the addiction part of it that would attract them to a mother that maybe has addictions, but because those circumstances are so vibrationally matched, that soul would be matched with the mother. Now, it wasn't a pre-birth contract like we think of in the other situations I was talking about, but yet, whenever you give birth to a child, you do contract to bring that child through with the best life possible. So, all that said, I'm going to describe some of the other circumstances. And as I was speaking about the false light, if souls were trapped in the false light or earthbound and never grew, they're going to be more inclined to be attracted to that type of situation. So there's a lot of confusion about contracts, and I want to talk about some of them. First thing I have to say is source is love. True source, creator, loves you with the purity and intent that we can't even imagine here. It's an even greater love. Those of us that do have children would understand that than we have for our own children. Never, ever, ever is it going to be a circumstance where it's a contract that somebody gets murdered, raped, those kinds of things. Those are an abomination of God, and we all know that. God does not make contracts with people, some innocent little baby. Okay, go down there, take your chances on getting murdered or not. That's not how that goes at all. Once we leave the other side and come into this third density reality, if we're not protected and if we don't know these things, we're kind of open and vulnerable. That's how that usually happens. And if somebody is murdered, that's not a contract. That was another person inflicting their free will on a person, the person that they killed or maimed or whatever. And it just doesn't make sense that somebody would choose these horrific circumstances. But what does happen is, like, say I was talking about the person who maybe died from a bar fight or something to do with alcohol, that they would be inclined to maybe come through to a mother that has problems with alcohol or that kind of thing. That is a different circumstance where it meets the needs of both people. Although it is a contract, that soul coming in is probably inspiring the mother to do better, to make different changes. But it wasn't sanctioned by source, put it that way. So, and then as I said, it's kind of like once you're born here, it's kind of like a risk. You're taking your chances that things could go well, things could go not so well. Say there's so many different circumstances of why we would choose to come into life, and for specific reasons, and I'm going to talk about those later on. So one of the first things I have written down that I wanted to talk about, some individuals are actually, when they're born, and they have come from source, they haven't been earthbound or in the false light, but they come from source and they come in targeted. Well, that is a soul who's maybe had a past life history where they played some big role or something, or maybe a soul, it could be an angelic soul because we do have human angels walking on the earth. You could have been from a specific family line going back thousands of years. And some of the deep state controllers do know who these people are. They don't exactly, I tried to get a little bit more specific information, but I did not get too specific. They don't necessarily, okay, so like say you were in a family of king and queens or something, some royalty way back then. They don't exactly have the genetics of those royal family members, but they've got a pretty good idea. So they can tell not for certain, but with a pretty good idea, the way my guides are explaining who you were and who your potential is. It has to do with your white light quotient that you come in with. So these souls can be targeted. And we've all heard about people who are targeted. So that's one thing. I talked about earlier the opportunistic soul. That's not necessarily a predetermined contract, but something that is contracted in the moment, say it that way. And one of the things I wanted to talk about in Atlantis and in Lemuria, when we had a society that was more fifth density in reality, back then, the way it worked was a mother and father who were in a loving, committed relationship and wanted to bring a child into the world would actually, before the conception even took place, they would petition the soul of an incoming child to come to them. And if the parents say they were insecure or insincere, not insecure, insincere, or they were not ready, or it wasn't the ideal circumstance, that request would be denied, maybe till another time after the parents of this incoming soul had grown or done A, B, C, and D. It just wasn't automatically that you conceive a child and you get a soul. And the thing that I had to ask the guides, because so much way back when, how did they prevent pregnancies from happening like we do today? Did they have some form of birth control? And what it actually was because we were such an enlightened society, call it that, at that time, people really had dominion and control over their own physical vessel. They could control the ovulation cycle, and which we cannot do today. We've lost that ability. So parents that wanted a child would just enact that ovulation cycle, and even if somebody enacted it on their own without petitioning the soul, no pregnancy would occur, or if it didn't, it wouldn't be viable. It would end in miscarriage because the soul would not come into the body of the incoming soul. And so it was a much different set of circumstances back then. Back then, they gave me, and I knew of this before, they told me to use this as an example, my guides did. When I had done a past life regression as a hypnotherapist with my twin flame Jay when he was still alive, he got to a Lemurian lifetime, which I was actually his niece in that lifetime. But I was asking some questions just about the lay of the land, the geography, what kind of foods do they eat? And do we have grass? Do we have or is it all sand, or how is it? And no, we did have grass just like we had today, but the grass had a consciousness and only grew, because then my next question was, well, did we have lawnmowers? How did we cut it? It only grew to the level we needed it or wanted it to. So it was just a completely different set of circumstances that these things happened. And at some point, my guides assure me we will be going back into that type of reality. But once we dropped in consciousness from a fifth density reality into a third density reality, all of these abilities and things that we had in Lemuria and Atlantis were diminished. And not only that, we've had a lot of, what would you say, DNA downgrades, not upgrades, downgrades over the years, so that we are not the same type of beings that we once were. We don't have the same capacities in this third density world. So more on the opportunistic soul and the false light. So say, they gave me this example. Say you had a lifetime 8,000 years ago. You were a soldier killed in battle. And after you died, your vibration was low. and you cross out of the physical and you're just confused and kind of wandering in the ethers. Well, that's the perfect setup for somebody as an opportunistic soul to be born into a chaotic situation, maybe where the parents fight, don't get along, there's a lot of violence. That because it matches the last thoughts and the what happened at the time of death in the last lifetime. So we also have karmic situations. Let's talk about that. Karma is a balance, not a punishment. And so some people that were in the false light or wandering the earth may have felt that it was their mission, their duty to come into an undesirable situation to pay off the karma. Well, that does pay off the karma, but that is not the only way it's done. What typically would have been a better situation for everyone involved is if that soul had, after their last life, had not remained earthbound, had crossed over into the heavens, where they would have actually had help coming to terms with what happened in their last life. Now, they may have chosen to come back into life into another situation of violence. They might have chosen to experience it even, so that, because first you have to identify the problem before you can make a change. So say maybe they wanted to alter the potential of the violence in that family with their lifetime. Or maybe they're going to come in and have a role that helps prevent violence. Maybe they're going to be a teacher, social worker, something like that, lawyer, something for justice. That's basically what happens. So karma doesn't have to play out where you're punished. It's just a way of balancing the energy. So I'm going to talk about some things that does not complete the karma. So say you've got person A and person B. Person A murders person B. What would the karma of that be? Well, the person that was not a karmic situation, that wasn't sanctioned by God, but they may have had past life memories. Maybe they were the ones in, maybe that's somebody that person killed in battle. That's more of an opportunistic thing that was never contracted by source. It wasn't your karma that you were supposed to die at the hands of this individual, but somebody else violated your free will and killed you. So now that person will carry the heaviness of that action and at some point have to make retribution for it, maybe lifetimes down the road, maybe right away. But it was never anything that was contracted by source. Then I spoke of the targeted individuals. I already spoke of that. Then we have the martyred soul. That is somebody who does contract with source to come into a dysfunction to change it. And as I spoke of in the last situation, where maybe the person who is violent is going to experience the violence to make a change. Or maybe it can be a person who agrees to have their life end in some tragic way that sheds light on something that is happening on the planet. Maybe it could be a situation like some toxin that we're all experiencing, that death sheds light that something is going on. It could be many, many situations. But believe it or not, some souls do choose, they contract with source to be martyrs. And when they cross over, it's not like you failed, you let yourself be martyred. No, they actually did sign up for that. The next thing I want to talk about is, this is a big one, health concerns. I've heard so many people say, well, you contracted to have this disease, or you contracted to have that. And that's just not necessarily true. One of the things, there are several reasons because, way back we didn't have the diseases we have now, and people did do self-healing, self-regeneration, that kind of thing. But as I said, our genetics have been cut way down. We also lived much longer than we currently do. But one of the reasons people have health concerns, with the exception of the family patterning and the lifestyle changes and all of the toxins and poisons that are in our environment. And as I spoke of, sometimes if somebody's born handicapped, it's because of a very tragic past life that they died the last time. But so the thing is, so say you're on the other side, you're in between lifetimes, you're like a ninth, 10th density being, and for some reason you agree to come back into another life in the third density. Well, our energy bodies that are that high in frequency have a lot of trouble meshing with the physical third density reality. And in reality, people tend to think of it that like we're this physical body and our soul fits inside of it. No, our physical body, our soul is actually the blueprint. That physical matter, our energy body, our soul is the blueprint that physical matter attaches to. So that's why you're going to find that you have someone in this lifetime, they may look exactly or very similar to a character they played 4,000 years ago. They may look very, very similar. Well, that is because when the essence comes in, that's the blueprint that the body forms onto, the physical matter forms onto. So you've got this very high density being trying to fit into a third density body. And it doesn't always work. There, a lot of times my guides tell me things like MS, a lot of the things that have to do with the bones, the physical structure, the muscular system, all of those things are things that are very often because the density of the soul coming in was too high of a frequency for the third density body that we have. So for those of us that carry those kinds of ailments or problems or whatever you want to call them, once we switch into fifth density reality, those issues will basically go away because you'll be able to bring more of your soul, more of your blueprint into the physical, and the physical will be able to hold it. So many people will get a healing once we go into fifth density reality. And so the other part there they asked me to talk about was just because you have the propensity, it's in your family genetics that maybe your family gets a certain type of cancer or anything. That does not mean that's your fate. That is actually your job to, if you can do it in this on this dense planet, to find out what it is, what those have gone before you, what they did and did not do right, and for you to be able to self-correct it and do things differently. It's not necessarily that because you're born into a family that has like rheumatoid arthritis is another disease that's like this, or lupus that has this history, that you're necessarily going to have it. But you are going to find a way to minimize it and work with it. And then once we do switch into 5D, these things will just fall away. Now, when is that going to happen? Nobody knows. It could be a few years. It could be 50 years. I don't know. I don't personally get it's going to be longer than 50 years. And, they said you could use this example. Say you have an older house with an older furnace, maybe it was built in the 1950s and you still have your original furnace. Well, you're going to try to upgrade and put a central air conditioning unit in. You do it and it doesn't work. Why? Because the furnace and the house doesn't have the forced air capacity that you need for that upgraded furnace. So it's just like it can't hold all the power, and so it's not going to work right. I know that was a dumb example, but that's just one I thought of. So once we go into 5D, not everybody is going to be immediately healed. The people that have been doing their spiritual homework and working on healing and ascension, those are the ones that'll just kind of just find themselves in 5D, put it that way. Those that have not started are going to be more fourth density. And once that happens, I think there will be a larger population of people in fourth density, which is good, but you're still open to, and I don't know when that happens, will we still have entities on the planet? I'm not sure. But fourth density leaves you open to astral beings. You can get pulled very easily back into third density. It's just kind of a messy area, that area in between to be in. And that's where a lot of the people in the light worker community, you could call it that, are in fourth density reality right now. And if they've done their healing work, they will ascend to 5 density reality very quickly. If you are in third density reality and stuck in your ego, that kind of thing, haven't done any of your healing work, you will probably remain in fourth density for quite some time. So, I'm looking at what else I have to talk about. That pretty much wraps it all up. So for the incoming soul, it's a combination of so many things that come into play. We cannot say that somebody, kind of just the quick answer everybody gets is somebody's having a bad experience. We cannot just say, oh, you contracted it, because that's not necessarily true. Because prior, maybe a year going back, there were actually contracts that were made with the false light. Well, those contracts are null and void, but the contracts you've made with Source, pretty much you're going to play those out. Those are not really negotiable, but those can be altered and improved so that you can heal. If you're in some kind of a situation that you're not liking or is not beneficial, yes, you are creating it. You may not understand how you're creating it, but what the idea would be is to connect with Source. You're always going to connect in your intuition through your belly and through prayer, and ask to be shown your next steps, what you need to do to alleviate this situation. So with that being said, I'm going to end this. My name is Kim. My website is www.embody-light.com. I do readings, hypnotherapy, Akashic records, twin flame work, energy healing, Reiki healing, sound healing, all kinds of different things. Check out my website. I also have on solstice, I have a singing bowl meditation set up. And so that's on my website if anybody would like to attend that. And please like the video and subscribe if you have not done so. And if you have any subjects that you would like covered or questions you'd like answered, please leave them in the comment section. I'm kind of running out of ideas of what to make videos of. It seems like I've talked about everything, but I'm sure there's some things people would still like clarity on. So I love you all. Have a blessed day. Bye-bye.